Hey, welcome everybody. We are so excited to launch Boost Your Relationship coaching and teaching and equipping all at this time. Yeah, I guess you're seeing this from recording, and that's totally fine. We are going to consistently do this on Wednesday afternoons, and we hope that if you're seeing this, you'll like it and you're going to join us live.
So we are going to be posting these recordings on an online community that we're part of called Empowering Minds, which is in the Mighty Network platform. So if you go to Mighty Networks and search for Empowering Minds, that's where all of our recordings will be stored.
We are Maren and Simon, and we are founders and the ones that show up in SMM coaching and consulting because we are super passionate about relationships.
So I'm a physician, and I have been involved in coaching for the last 15 years, as well as practicing as well. And I really enjoy coaching. And Maren and I have been through a lot in our relationship, and we've learned a lot, and we'd love to share that with you.
We have been married 31 years, and we have made it through a lot of challenges over those years. We've raised 2 kids and navigated careers. Right now, I have my own private practice as a therapist and a coach.
And so I have a lot of other businesses I'm involved in, but my primary passion is really in coaching. And so I do a lot of coaching, and very excited that we can be here. So really, when we think about why are we doing this, when we think about relationships, whether it's at work, whether it's at home with our kids, with our significant others, whoever it may be, we all face challenges. And I know for us, for a long time, we wanted to know, how do we go about finding mentors or finding people who we could have those conversations with. And we found it really hard. Now, we have been in therapy, and that was really helpful. But sometimes you just don't need a full therapy. What you need is just a little boost. And so we are starting on Wednesdays to be present so that we can answer questions, but also give you little tips that we think might be helpful.
Yep. So our topic today is overcoming judgment. I think every one of us knows what it feels like to be judged. I mean, that's can be really, really challenging. And I think we all know what it's like to feel judgmental towards someone else.
And it's actually very normal that you might have some judgment. So having judgment isn't a bad thing. It isn't abnormal. It's actually really normal. So we want to start off by saying, hey, guess what? We all have judgments. Now, we might have different biases, and we might have different reasons for the judgment. And we might want to ask ourselves, how is that impacting our relationships?
Right. And so what we're going to talk about today actually is not about getting rid of judgment.
Right.
It's about when our brains go there, or when we experience it from someone else, what are we going to do about it?
And so, think about an example. Maybe it's a work environment where you feel judged by somebody, or you're feeling kind of judgmental maybe about somebody's work ethic or the way they're working, or maybe it's at home, and maybe it's the way your kids are, or maybe it's because of how your significant other might be acting, or how they're not understanding, or whatever it might be. You might have these judgments that just kind of come in and out of our minds and thinking. And when that happens, it changes and alters our behavior. And what we're really saying is there's a difference between you and me, and I'm using judgment to be okay with that objection to that difference. So I'm objecting to the difference, which actually leads to conflict. And I'm using judgment as a way to justify that it's okay to go into conflict.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And all of that happens like so fast.
Very fast.
Right. But I think it is key to recognize that judgment happens when there's a different perspective. And I think that's really helpful to keep in mind, that we don't necessarily have to label things, all the things, as right or wrong, good or bad. We can open up some space to go, oh, what is the difference here that I'm internally objecting to?
And, for us, one of the things that we find often is because we think very differently. I'm very big picture. Lauren's very detailed and organized. I'm less that. And so when we're talking about things, what we find is that there are these differences that come up. Now, we have some options here of what to do with those differences. I can get upset and frustrated because Maren doesn't understand me, and she should understand me, and she doesn't. Or I can say, okay, she has a different perspective, and I'm willing to be curious about that perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm thinking about what you mentioning the option of getting angry. There's some other default things that happen when we experience anxiety, shame, or that objection to difference. Another one is people please. If it feels really uncomfortable to us that there's a difference, then some of us default to people pleasing.
Yeah. So, and then one of the things a lot of people might do is actually shut down, right? And when they shut down, they get quiet. They may internalize a lot of emotion. They don't really talk. They might kind of even go into another room without even saying why they're going into another room.
Yeah, we call that turning away. And it's like we imagine physically, like if we were right here facing the camera and we literally started turning away, it's like just ignoring. I mean, that can feel really hurtful. Of course, getting angry at someone can feel really hurtful too. People pleasing, that might not feel as ishy, but at the same time, if it's out of alignment with how we want to show up, then that can really not feel good inside.
Right. And so one of the things that we have to kind of struggle through is being really aware of where we're at in the moment. And that can be really challenging because, again, as Martin said, these things happen so fast that we may not know why we're even reacting the way we are.
Mm-hmm. I keep thinking of a practical situation. We're going to take something small, but like I like to drive pretty safely. I don't speed a lot. I don't zigzag in and out of traffic. Like I try to plan ahead so I'm not rushing. And if I see a car tailgating me and then I move over and they just fly by, I'd have judgment. And internally, I might be like, oh, that is so stupid, or that is so dangerous. Like safety is one of my values. So to notice when that judgment comes up, like Simon was just mentioning, like what's going on inside of me. And instead of calling them names or like letting that judgment overtake me, I can go, ooh, that bumps up against my value of safety. That's why it's such an objection in that moment.
So when we think about judgment, I mean, there are all of these emotions that come up. And oftentimes, I know for myself, it's about things that have happened in my past that I feel like I'm experiencing in the present. So I may have been hurt by something and I had a meaning that I put to it. And now I'm bringing that meaning into the present and putting that on somebody else. And I may have no idea what they're doing or why they're doing it, but I've already made a judgment that I know what they're all about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm thinking of, so what do we do about it?
Right.
To me, one of the key things after I bring in that awareness, like what's going on inside of me, noticing what is the difference happening here, is to do some separating out of if someone judges me, that's 100% about them. If I judge someone else, that's 100% about what's going on inside of me.
And that can be hard, right? It can be hard to separate that out, and it can be hard to feel like somehow when I do that, I'm putting a wall up. And we're not talking about putting a wall. What we're still talking about is really becoming aware of what's actually going on. What is mine and what's not mine? And this is sort of the first step in establishing good, healthy boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what would you say is the difference between wall in terms of turning against, turning away, and a healthy boundary?
Yeah, it's a great question because I think oftentimes, as we've experienced, right, it's when we feel like we're moving in a relationship and we're trying to stop a process from happening, right? Something that's going to be hurtful or something that we feel unsafe about. And we're kind of putting our hands out, like pushing away. It's almost like we're actually contributing to the ongoing disconnection in the relationship. Whereas as healthy boundaries, I think there's an opportunity to actually be invitational and curious by saying, "Hey, I know this is not mine. This is there's something going on with you, and I want to be curious about that. I'd really like to understand that."
Yeah. Just because we recognize that when someone judges us, it's about them, it doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt. And I think that's also part of what do we do? How do we overcome judgment is the fact that how do we take care of ourselves in the midst of feeling that hurt?
And these emotions are very common. Think about the last time maybe you felt like somebody was judging you. You might have had that hurt or pain or feeling maybe dismissed or belittled, even devalued in some way. So those emotions are really real. Those are real emotions. So even as we talk about how we manage the judgment, we're not saying that there's anything wrong in the emotion, because those are real emotions, and being aware of them can actually be really helpful and healthy.
Mm-hmm. And it's like making that choice, right? Like, am I going to call the other person names? Am I going to turn against and call him an idiot or yell at them or even swear? Like, am I going to do that? Or am I going to put my energy into taking care of myself?
So there's sort of two pieces here, right, that we're starting to talk about. One is, how do we take care of ourselves? And then how do we let go of what is the other person's? And both of those can be challenging. So when we talk about taking care of ourselves, what does that mean? What do you think of some of the things that you think about in that moment that could be really helpful for people, for ourselves to kind of take care of ourselves?
Yeah. I think for me, I think about, what am I feeling? Like, identify, like, am I feeling hurt? Am I feeling scared? Am I feeling angry? Right? There could be so many different emotions, but like tuning into that and honoring that. And that could even be writing it down. It could be telling a person that you're connected to and safe with. And it's holding it in the space of perspective taking. So I'm honoring the emotion, and I'm trying to separate myself out emotionally from that other person. And one tool is to do some forgiveness.
Well, and I think also pausing, right? Just pausing, even just taking a deep breath, like you said, kind of recognizing, naming what you're feeling and honoring it. And so when we talk about honoring it, what we're saying is, well, when we don't honor it, we're saying things like, well, I shouldn't feel that way, or I'm bigger than this, or this is a weak place to be, rather than just saying, hey, this is what it is, this is what I feel, and not putting judgment on yourself for feeling what you're actually feeling, and saying, hey, this is what I feel.
Yeah. And if you are feeling judged by someone that you can talk to, that's another great step, is to have a conversation and to invite some perspective taking. Maybe the other person didn't even realize that that was a judgment, or I perceived it as a judgment.
And how do you think somebody could kind of enter into that space if they're the ones feeling judged? How would you?
Yeah,
some things kind of...
That's a great question. I'm thinking of something like this is something we actually do is, hey, the story in my head right now is you were judging me for being messy. I'll say so. I'll make that one up. But it's owning, this is what's going on in my head, instead of putting it on Simon. So the story in my head right now is, and when I experience that, I feel.
And so it's really about taking away some of that reactivity, right? So rather than lashing back out or running away or whatever it might look like, it's really saying, hey, I do have some ownerships of what I'm feeling and what I'm experiencing. And I'm wondering, I'm curious about what's actually going on here, right? And so part of it is, if somebody can enter that conversation and say, oh, that was really not my intent at all. I wasn't trying to judge you. I wasn't trying to hurt you. And then there's some curious questions that the other person, so I'd really like to understand a little bit more about what was going on and what you were trying to really share with me.
Yeah, I was going to bring up curiosity as well, because that is the key tool that I use when I notice I'm going into judgment. First of all, when I notice a lot of judgment coming up inside of myself, either toward myself or toward someone else, it's a signal to me that I have put down my value of honor. And I try to really pay attention to that, because I want to be honoring to other people and I want to honor myself. Judgment undermines that. So first of all, I recognize, oh, I've put down my value. Second of all, I open up some space and try to be curious. So if I'm judging someone else for what they're doing, I go, I wonder what that's about.
Don't you think part of that, I mean, one of the things I know we've talked about is we can't mind read, right? And so one of the things I know I've had to kind of work at is to not make assumptions that I know why people are doing what they're doing, right? And I'm curious what your thoughts are around that, because I think for me, that's what leads to my reactivity. I make an assumption about why you're acting the way you're acting, or why somebody else might be acting the way they're acting. And because of that assumption, I then react to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
It's easy to be reactive. And curiosity for me helps calm that down.
You're right.
And it helps get me into a place of wondering instead of feeling like I have to know.
Right. I think that's a big part of it, isn't it? Is, we have this thought that somehow I need to know, I need to understand. And what we're really saying is, I need the other person to agree with me. That's actually what we're talking about. And rather than saying, can I really have a stance of curiosity that says, I am really curious, even if your perspective is really different from mine. Can I still stay in that place and be solid of saying, okay, that's different. I can see it from your point of view, but that doesn't, that's not how I would see it. Right.
Yeah. We need to practice perspective taking. It's not always easy to do that. And I think what we've discovered is, as we practice perspective taking, our judgment has decreased, and we're more likely to hold space for that uncertainty. Like, I don't have to completely understand Simon to be curious. And even at the end, I don't have to completely understand his perspective. I can still honor that.
So some key things I'm thinking about as we've been talking, one is, if you feel like you're being judged and you're noticing the emotion, one of the first things to do is just take a breath, take a deep breath, kind of center yourself, and just be aware of what you're feeling. If you feel like you're being reactive, the next step would be to actually step away and just say, hey, I just need a moment. I'm just feeling a lot of things right now. I just need to step away. Oftentimes we have this feeling like I've got to respond right away. We actually don't need to. So if I can then come back with a more curious stance of saying, hey, this is what I was feeling. I wasn't sure what you were trying to communicate, and that this is what the story was in my head, then I can step into that curiosity. So there's some steps that you can take. Now, if you feel like you're being judgmental, that again is really about the differences. So how can you be curious about what those differences are that maybe you have some objection to? And one of the things I see in my work life is, maybe people work at different speeds, or they work in different styles. And I can find myself getting real judgmental about that, rather than saying, they come from a different perspective, and I'd really like to learn more about that.
Yeah, I appreciate you recapping and restating what we've talked about so far. I have a couple other things that I say to myself, either when I'm judging myself or I'm feeling judged by someone else. There's a couple phrases that I have in my resource bank to tell myself. The first one is that I am the expert on my life. And if I'm judging someone else, I go, I think I know, but really, they're the expert on their life. And it leaves some more space for that curiosity and the uncertainty. Like, I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
They're the expert on their life. I'm the expert on my life. The second thing that I tell myself is, I'm doing the best that I can.
Right.
And in the midst of that, our capacity changes.
Yeah. So
maybe one day I start crying and yelling at you, or like basically having a meltdown. And sometimes that happens if I am feeling really hurt or tired. And to recognize at that moment, that was the best that I could do. Maybe next time I'll have a better capacity, or I'll be able to catch it earlier or eat something earlier. But really to go, I'm going to give myself grace. I'm doing the best I can with what I have at my disposal right now.
Yeah, I really like that, because I think oftentimes we sometimes enter into relationship thinking, I got to get it all figured out and I got to get it all sorted out, and sometimes we just don't have the capacity for that. We have really tough days, right? All of us, life happens, and sometimes life can really be difficult. So just being aware of that and saying, wow, I'm really having a tough time, and I don't know if this is a great time for us to have this conversation, even can be really helpful in that. So we're excited that you're here and listening to this video. A couple of things that we do have a YouTube channel. We'd really love for you to subscribe. We have a lot of coaching tips on there. We're continuing to add to that, and so that also is available for you. We are planning on continuing every Wednesday around this time, 4:30 to 5 p.m. Central Time, to be available for a little bit of discussion, but also if you have relationship questions, available. And lastly, we have our website, smmcoachingandconsulting.com. I'm sorry, smmcoachingconsulting.com. There's no and in there. And on that website, you'll get to learn a little bit more about what we do. We do both team and individual coaching around relationships and how they may be impacting you, whether it's at home or whether it's at work. And if there are resources that we can help provide, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening to this video. We hope you find this helpful, and we're looking forward to your comments. Take care.